Hey folks, welcome back to Animal Quest. In this episode, we're going through 6 wildlife encounters where dream vacations turn into nightmares. But first, let's start with a woman that was attacked by a deadly lizard. It was September 8, 2019, inside a Komodo Park, Indonesia, a chain of rugged volcanic islands where Komodo dragons still live in the wild. It is one of the few places on Earth where visitors can see the world's largest living lizard in its natural environment. Emilia Carter was 31, a British travel photographer with a modest but loyal audience online. Her work focused on unfamiliar destinations, wildlife, and isolated landscapes. While many creators chased luxury resorts and famous landmarks, Emilia preferred places that felt more difficult to reach and more dangerous to photograph. She had spent years photographing reptiles, snakes, geckos, lizards, and other animals most people would rather admire from a distance. When she learned she could photograph Komodo dragons in the wild, she booked the trip almost immediately. And I get that impulse. A Komodo dragon is not the kind of animal you see every day. It is enormous, prehistoric looking, and almost impossible to ignore. But there is a difference between wanting an unforgettable image and deciding the rules do not apply to you. After arriving at the park, Emilia joined a guided walking tour. The group was small, but the safety rules were serious. Stay together, remain on the designated route, never approach a dragon, and never move closer to get a better photo. The guide repeated those instructions because Komodo dragons are not oversized lizards lounging harmlessly in the sun. They are powerful predators and scavengers. They can remain still for long periods, but they are always aware of what is happening around them. For the first hour, the hike was quiet. The group saw tropical birds, deer tracks, and movement in the dry grass, but no dragons. Then they came across fresh tracks, pressed into the trail, and disturbed vegetation nearby. A dragon had passed through recently. Eventually, the group spotted one resting beneath scattered shrubs beyond the main path. Its body was almost motionless in the morning heat. To the visitors, it looked calm, but stillness is not the same as safety. Komodo dragons use their forked tongues to collect scent particles from the air and ground. They can detect activity around them, and when they decide to move, they can do it much faster than people expect. Their serrated teeth can tear deeply, and a bite can cause severe bleeding and swelling. The group stopped at a safe distance. Cameras came up. The guide watched the dragon and kept an eye on the terrain. For a while, everything went exactly as it should have. The dragon remained where it was. The visitors got their photographs. Nobody crossed the boundary. But Emilia wanted more. She wanted the closer, more personal shot. And honestly, this is the part that gets me every time. I understand wanting the image that makes people stop scrolling. But when the only thing between you and an animal like that is a few yards of brush and your own confidence, you are not taking a creative risk anymore. You are taking a physical one. When the group began moving along the trail, Emilia slowed down. Several yards opened between her and the others. The guide noticed and signaled for her to stay with the group. Emilia paused. Instead of fully returning to the trail, she moved toward the edge of the vegetation, trying to find a clearer angle. This is the moment I always come back to. She had the warning. It was spoken out loud. It was happening in real time, and she chose to keep moving.
What she did not know was that the dragon had shifted position. It had moved through the brush and was now facing her from a different angle. Emilia took another step. The dragon raised its head. Then it moved. The sudden motion made Emilia step backward. She tried to regain the trail, but the uneven ground worked against her. She stumbled, and the dragon closed the remaining distance. It bit into her lower leg. She fell. The guide immediately ordered the rest of the visitors farther back, rather than rushing directly toward the animal. That might sound cold to some people, but it was the right call. A second person getting too close would only have created another emergency. The dragon remained near Emilia for several moments before moving away from the immediate area. Only then could the guide and rangers safely approach Blood was spreading across the ground. The bite had torn through muscle and damaged a major blood vessel in her lower leg. Rangers applied pressure dressings, secured the area, and began moving her toward the nearest point where a boat could reach the island. The evacuation was slow, the terrain was rough, and the team had to stop repeatedly to reinforce the dressings and assess her condition. During the boat transfer, Emilia became pale and weak. Her level of responsiveness began to fall as blood loss continued. By the time she reached medical care, she was barely conscious. Staff attempted emergency treatment and worked to control the damaged vessel, but the injuries had already become critical. She developed profound hemorrhagic shock. Her blood pressure collapsed, she lost consciousness, and her heart stopped. Resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. The dragon had not chased her across the island. It had not hunted her for miles. The encounter began when someone moved into the animal's immediate space and turned a controlled wildlife viewing opportunity into a close-range confrontation. That is what makes this one difficult to dismiss as bad luck. The fatal moment lasted seconds, but the choices that created it took several minutes.
While Emilia moved closer for a photograph, the next person entered danger by accident.
It was August 19, 2018, on a remote stretch of the Shire River in southern Malawi. Tall reeds lined the banks, while elephants, antelope, crocodiles, water birds, and hippos moved through the surrounding wetlands. Emily White was 33, a Canadian travel writer who had spent years documenting difficult destinations and remote communities. She preferred places that felt authentic and unpolished, the kind of journeys most travel influencers skipped in favor of luxury resorts. There is nothing wrong with that ambition. Wanting a real story is not the problem. The problem starts when the hunt for authenticity quietly becomes a hunt for proximity, and you stop noticing where one ends and the other begins. Shortly after arriving, Emily joined a small guided canoe excursion on the Shire River. Before launching, the guide gave the group a safety briefing: remain seated, follow instructions, and never approach wildlife. For the first hour, the river was calm. Fish eagles circled overhead. Kingfishers darted through the reeds. Antelope drank quietly at the water's edge. Then, the guide slowed near a wider bend and pointed to several large shapes breaking the surface. Hippos. The guide immediately increased the distance between the canoe and the animals. The group photographed the pod from farther away. From a distance, hippos can look almost harmless. They spend so much time sitting low in the water that people forget what they are looking at. But hippos are not slow-moving cows in a river. They are several thousand-pound wild animals with enormous strength, powerful jaws, and the ability to move much faster than most people expect. They can become extremely defensive when someone or something enters their space. Emily photographed the hippos from the canoe. The images were good. For most visitors, that would have been enough. But she wanted one more photograph from a slightly different angle.
That phrase, one more, does a lot of work in stories like this. If you ever watched a photographer work, you know there is always a better frame just beyond reach.
The trouble is that wildlife does not care how close you are to getting the perfect shot. As the guide began turning the canoe away from the hippos, a shift in the current pushed the boat toward a shallow side channel. The guide corrected the canoe and told everyone to remain seated. Emily shifted her position to keep the animals in frame. Her footing slipped. She went over the side. She landed in shallow water near the edge of the channel, separated from the canoe and far closer to the hippos than the guide wanted anyone to be. The guide immediately began steering the canoe away from the animals while keeping the other passengers inside. He did not jump into the water after her. That decision mattered. When a person enters the water near a hippo, especially suddenly, the situation can change in seconds. Another passenger entering the same water would not necessarily have helped Emily. It could have created two victims instead of one. One of the hippos turned toward her. Emily tried to move toward the canoe, but her movement brought her closer to the animal's path. The hippo accelerated. It reached her before she had time to react. The animal struck her with its head and jaws, knocking her beneath the surface. The impact caused crushing injuries and fractures.
while its teeth caused deep wounds to her torso and leg. The guide continued moving the canoe away from the pod while directing the passengers to remain inside. Emily resurfaced briefly, then disappeared beneath the muddy water again. After several moments, the hippo moved away. Only then did the guide cautiously maneuver back toward her. Emily was pulled into the canoe. She was alive but badly injured. The attack had caused extensive trauma, blood loss, fractures, and water aspiration. The group headed for the nearest accessible landing point, while another passenger contacted local emergency services. For several minutes, Emily remained responsive. Then her breathing became labored and signs of severe shock developed. At the landing point, she was transferred into a vehicle for transport to medical care. She lost consciousness during the journey. Emergency treatment began immediately, but the injuries were too extensive. She developed respiratory failure associated with water aspiration and severe traumatic shock. Resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. The hippo had not hunted her. It had not pursued the canoe for miles. A person entered its immediate environment unexpectedly, and the animal responded with overwhelming force. I think that is why hippos are so easy to underestimate. They often look still, almost lazy, until the exact second they do not. Sometimes a person does not even need to make a wildly reckless decision for things to become fatal.
Emily lipped, but the next one happened only because the victim only wanted a better view.
It was March 26, 2022, in the Bastar district of Chhattisgarh, India. Every spring, families across the region enter the forest before sunrise to gather mahua flowers. The blossoms are important for food, drink, and income, but mahua trees attract more than people. Sloth bears also forage around the same trees, especially during the night and early morning. Danny Brooks was 34 and originally from New Zealand. He was traveling through central India, choosing village stays and local traditions over hotels and major landmarks. When his host family told him about the mahua harvest, he accepted their invitation to document it. To Danny, it was a rare cultural moment. To the villagers, it was simply work, repeated every spring. Before the group left, a village elder gave a short set of instructions. Stay within sight or calling distance of the others. Avoid dense vegetation around productive mahua trees and never approach a bear. The warning was not dramatic. It was not meant to frighten anyone. It reflected generations of living in the same forest as wildlife. The group entered before sunrise with flashlights and woven baskets. As daylight filtered through the canopy, the scent of fallen mahua blossoms filled the air. Danny found the scene peaceful. Villagers moved beneath different trees, gathering flowers while remaining close enough to see or hear one another. As he watched them work, Danny spotted a large mahua tree a short distance away. Its base appeared thick with untouched blossoms. He believed he could get a better view of the harvest from there. A local villager noticed and signaled him back. Danny slowed, but he kept going.
He was still close enough to hear the group through the trees, or at least he thought he was.
A few more steps carried him behind dense vegetation, and the others disappeared from view. Near the tree, Danny noticed fresh droppings and disturbed flowers. Then he saw the bear. It was only a short distance away, still foraging. Danny froze. The bear raised its head. Sloth bears do not usually stalk people as prey, but that distinction does not bring much comfort when a person surprises one at close range. They have a strong sense of smell, relatively poor eyesight, and can react with sudden, intense aggression when startled. The bear charged. Danny tried to retreat, but it knocked him down. It clawed at his upper body and bit him before breaking away into the vegetation. The attack lasted only moments. The injuries did not. By the time the villagers realized Danny was missing, he was no longer visible from the harvest area. They searched cautiously, aware that the bear could still be nearby. Eventually, they found him beneath the trees. He was conscious but severely injured, with deep wounds to his face, scalp, and upper body. The evacuation through the forest was slow. Villagers carried him toward the nearest accessible road, stopping to control bleeding and monitor his condition. Danny remained conscious during part of the evacuation, where he gave details of what happened. Then he became increasingly weak. By the time they reached the road, he was no longer responsive. A vehicle transported him toward medical care, but his condition deteriorated during the journey. He died from severe traumatic injuries and blood loss before receiving definitive treatment.
The next man was not chasing a photograph or wandering away from a harvest. He was working.
It was May 14th, 2022, in a remote forested valley of Meghalaya in northeastern India. Dense, subtropical forest covered a landscape filled with limestone formations and cave systems. Survey teams occasionally entered the valleys to map passages and document geological features. Aaron Mitchell was 28, a graduate student from the United Kingdom studying geographic information systems. He joined a small survey team to log coordinates, map cave entrances, and help create digital records for future environmental research. His role had nothing to do with wildlife. He operated handheld GPS equipment, recorded locations, and helped build maps of the cave network. For Aaron, the expedition combined two interests: scientific fieldwork and remote landscapes. Each morning, the team hiked several miles through steep forest, carrying ropes, GPS units, radios, measuring equipment, and supply cases. Local guides gave the same instructions every day: stay with your assigned partner, remain on the route, and if wildlife is encountered at close range, do not approach it or run. The forest's animals generally avoided people, but a sudden close encounter could still become dangerous. The first 3 days passed without incident. The team measured chambers, logged routes, and documented rock formations. Wildlife sightings were limited to birds, butterflies, and the occasional deer moving through the undergrowth. On the fourth morning, Aaron and two companions were assigned to mark several cave entrances. After hours of hiking, the terrain split around a rocky outcrop. Aaron stopped at a waypoint to record coordinates, while the other two continued toward another entrance. He was not completely alone. He had a radio. The route had been surveyed that morning. There was a meeting point ahead.
But dense vegetation and uneven ground blocked view contact with the others.
Following the planned route around the outcrop, Aaron heard movement in the brush. What Aaron did not realize was that he had moved very close to an Indian leopard resting in dense cover. Indian leopards are generally elusive and tend to avoid people, but a leopard, surprised at close range, can respond defensively. They are powerful animals, capable of sudden movement through thick vegetation, and their claws and teeth can cause severe trauma. The leopard emerged. Aaron stopped. For a moment, neither moved. The animal had an escape route through the vegetation, but Aaron's presence had brought them into extremely close proximity. Then the leopard lunged. Aaron attempted to retreat, but it knocked him off balance. It bit his upper body and clawed at him before breaking away into the vegetation. There was no long pursuit. The entire encounter lasted moments. Aaron's radio fell during the attack. His companions heard the disturbance and moved cautiously toward the waypoint. They called out, but received no answer.
After several minutes, they found Aaron unconscious near the route. He had severe wounds to his upper body and neck with heavy bleeding.
The team immediately applied pressure and used their radio to call for assistance. They did not pursue the leopard or enter the vegetation where it had disappeared. Aaron briefly regained consciousness during the evacuation. The possibility of survival depended on reaching surgical care quickly, but the terrain worked against them. The team had to move him over steep ground toward the nearest road, stopping repeatedly to maintain pressure on the wounds and monitor his breathing. Then his condition worsened. The bleeding continued. His pulse weakened. His breathing slowed. He became unresponsive again. By the time an evacuation vehicle reached the team, Aaron was in severe shock. He was transported toward medical care, but his circulation continued to fail during the journey. He died before reaching definitive surgical treatment. Sometimes people talk about wildlife safety as if every incident must begin with somebody doing something stupid. That is not always true.
Because in the next story, sometimes the wilderness does not need an invitation.
It was August 14th, 2022, in the Busanga Plains of Kafue National Park, Zambia. The seasonal floodplain stretched for miles, broken by tree islands and tall golden grass. The area's relative isolation made it appealing to travelers seeking a close encounter with wildlife. Patrick Sway was 42, a civil engineer from Ireland with a deep fascination for historical hunting cultures and a belief that human intelligence could outmatch the instincts of a lion. That belief was never going to hold up in the Busanga Plains. Patrick preferred national parks to cities and beach resorts. After reading about Kafue's walking safaris, he booked a week at a remote bush camp. Walking safaris place visitors directly in the landscape, with no vehicle between them and the wilderness. They depend on experienced guides trained to read wind direction, tracks, vegetation, and animal behavior, while keeping a group's movement controlled and predictable. Patrick's own experience with wildlife came mostly from documentaries watched at home. It gave him confidence. It did not give him experience. The first 2 days went well. The group saw tracks, distant animals, and signs of recent activity. On the third morning, Patrick became restless. He had started to believe the safest sightings were also the least memorable ones. He wanted more. His plan was simple and reckless. Fall behind while the guide was occupied and find a better view on his own.
The guide noticed the growing gap almost immediately and stopped the group. Patrick began moving back toward them.
It appeared the warning had worked. Then, during the few seconds when the guide turned to position the other visitors, Patrick moved away from the route again and slipped into the tall grass. The guide immediately secured the rest of the group and radioed the camp for assistance. He did not send visitors after Patrick. Patrick had only gone a short distance when he spotted a partially consumed antelope carcass in the grass. He stopped. That should have been enough. Instead, he moved closer. What Patrick could not see were the lions resting nearby. Several animals were concealed in the surrounding vegetation. There is a massive difference between seeing a carcass from a safe distance and walking toward it when lions may still be feeding.
Lions can defend food, and a person entering the immediate area around a fresh kill can provoke a rapid defensive response.
Patrick took another step. One lion stood. Patrick finally recognized the danger and turned to retreat. The lion charged. It crossed the distance quickly, knocked him down, and bit and clawed at him. A second lion approached the disturbance but did not immediately join the attack. Patrick suffered severe injuries to his neck, chest, and arm. Back on the route, the guide had already begun a controlled response. A vehicle was sent from camp while the guide kept the other visitors together at a safe distance. After a careful search, the rescue team located Patrick. The lions were still near the carcass. The guide did not approach on foot. Instead, the vehicle was brought around from a safer angle, creating a physical barrier between the lions and the injured man.
Eventually, the lions moved farther away. Only then did the team reach Patrick.
He was still alive, barely. He had sustained major wounds to his neck, chest, and arm, with heavy bleeding from multiple injuries. The rescue team controlled the most obvious external bleeding and moved him into the vehicle. For a moment, it seemed possible he might survive. Then, his condition worsened. The wounds to his neck and chest had caused major blood loss. His blood pressure continued to fall during the evacuation over rough terrain. He became unresponsive before reaching the medical facility. Emergency resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. When the incident was reviewed, the lions had not acted in some unexplained or unnatural way. A person had entered the immediate area of a fresh kill while lions were present. The animals responded to an intrusion.
Honestly, Patrick is the person in this episode whose confidence confuses me the most. A lifetime of documentaries does not qualify anyone to outthink a lion in its own environment.
Wildlife does not care how intelligent you believe you are, how much you have read, or how certain you feel. The next danger waited beside water that looked completely harmless. It was June 17, 2016, along a remote stretch of the Rufiji River in southern Tanzania. Broad channels of slow-moving water cut through floodplain grassland and scattered woodland. Hippos, waterbirds, fish, and Nile crocodiles shared the river with nearby fishing communities. Kevin Hale was 36, an American freelance wildlife photographer who had spent years building a portfolio around remote African landscapes. He was not a thrill seeker in the obvious sense. His work depended on patience, long lenses, and waiting for wildlife to enter the frame naturally rather than forcing an encounter. That distinction matters, because Kevin was not planning to swim with crocodiles or provoke one. His mistake was more ordinary than that. He had spent the morning photographing fishermen working from narrow wooden boats. By late afternoon, he noticed several crocodiles lying along a muddy bank across a shallow inlet. The local guide had worked around the river for years and understood the danger of approaching the shoreline. He kept the boat well offshore, positioning Kevin where he could use a telephoto lens without disturbing the animals. For almost an hour, everything went exactly right. The crocodiles barely moved. One large animal rested with its mouth partially open on the mud, while smaller crocodiles lay farther along the bank. Kevin photographed them from the boat, changing lenses and waiting for occasional movement. Then the light changed. The sun dropped lower behind the trees, throwing the crocodiles into shadow. Kevin noticed that reflections on the water would create a better composition from the opposite side of the inlet. The guide kept the boat away from the bank. Kevin still was not satisfied.
This is where I think the mistake becomes especially recognizable. He was not doing something that looked wildly reckless at first.
He was making a chain of small decisions that each seemed harmless on their own. Move a little closer, get a lower angle, take one more photograph. That is how danger develops sometimes. Not through one huge dramatic act, but through a series of choices that keep moving someone closer to the line. The guide eventually brought the boat closer to the edge of the channel, but kept it several yards from the muddy shoreline. He warned Kevin not to step onto the bank. Kevin leaned over the side to photograph the largest crocodile from a lower angle. Then he noticed a narrow strip of exposed mud extending into the water only a few feet away. It looked solid enough to support his weight. The guide warned him again and began turning the boat away from the shore. Kevin stepped onto the muddy edge before the boat had completely pulled away. The surface held for less than a second. His right leg broke through the mud up to his knee. He fell forward, catching himself with both hands at the water's edge. The splash was small. The crocodile's reaction was not. Nile crocodiles are ambush predators. They can remain almost motionless in or beside water for long periods, relying on camouflage before making a short, explosive strike.
Their jaws are designed to seize and hold prey, while their powerful bodies can drag victims into the water and twist violently.
The largest crocodile on the bank had barely moved for an hour. Then it surged forward. It clamped onto Kevin's lower leg and pulled him sideways into the water before he could regain his footing. The guide immediately maneuvered the boat back toward Kevin while keeping the crew aboard rather than sending another person into the water. A floating line was thrown toward him. Kevin managed to grab it. The crocodile pulled against his leg as the crew tried to keep him from being dragged farther from the boat. The animal twisted its body, causing additional tearing injuries. Kevin disappeared beneath the surface. The guide kept the boat positioned as safely as possible while the crew maintained tension on the line. Eventually, the crocodile released its grip. Kevin resurfaced near the boat. The crew pulled him to the side and hauled him aboard. He was conscious but severely injured. His lower leg had sustained crushing and tearing damage, including injuries to major blood vessels. The guide immediately moved the boat away from the shoreline while another crew member applied firm pressure to the wound.
I do not think people always understand how quickly blood loss can become the real emergency after an attack like this.
The animal may disappear in seconds, but the damage it leaves behind can keep getting worse every minute. The boat reached a riverside landing used by the local community. The guide contacted local assistance and arranged onward transport. Kevin remained conscious through the first part of the journey. Then his blood pressure began to fall. He became weak, pale, and increasingly unresponsive. By the time the vehicle reached the clinic, he was in severe hemorrhagic shock. Medical staff attempted emergency treatment and worked to control the bleeding, but but the extent of the tissue and vascular damage made stabilization extremely difficult. Kevin suffered cardiac arrest during treatment. Resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. The crocodile had not chased him across the river. It had not followed the boat for miles. It remained nearly motionless until Kevin entered the narrow area where it could strike. That is what gets me with crocodiles. People expect danger to announce itself. They expect an animal to roar, charge, splash, or give some obvious signal that it is time to leave.
A crocodile can do the opposite. It can stay still, it can disappear into the background, and by the time someone realizes the shoreline is not empty, well, the distance between safety and disaster can be measured in seconds.